Alright, now in the last three sections, or last three videos of this particular section, we learned how to find the domain range in zeros from a graph. We learned how to apply the vertical line test to see whether or not a graph is a function. And we learned how to find the intervals where a graph is either increasing or decreasing. Okay, the next section is determining where relative maxima and minima occur on a graph. And it's about as easy as the other things that we've been doing. Alright, so relative maxima and minima. Just like in the last section when we were finding increasing and decreasing intervals, maybe you have a situation where you want to analyze a graph and find out where the peak or where the valley occurs in your sales. Where did you have the most sales? Where did you have the least sales? So we talk about extrema, maxima and minima. Maxima and minima are just the plurals of maximum and minimum. And we also use the term relative. It has nothing to do with brothers, sisters, and anything like that. It indicates that on a graph you may have an absolute maximum position, but you also might have some relative maximum positions. Little peaks on your graph that aren't the highest of everything, but in their particular general area happens to be a peak. And you'll understand that a lot better as we look at the graph on the next slide. Okay, so this graph increases without bound on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The reason I point that out is sometimes people forget about that fact, okay? Because what that means is there is no absolute maximum on this graph because it's going forever up in the left and the right-hand side. So when you look at this graph, you may notice three different points there. There's a relative min right there, there's a relative max right there, and there's an absolute min right there. Okay, and that's where we get into the difference between relative and absolute. Okay, as I said before, this graph goes up without bound on both those sides. Okay, so this point right here isn't the highest that the graph gets, but it is a peak, right? In the general area that we're talking about, that's the maximum in that area. So we call it a relative max. Okay, when it comes to the minimum, this is a valley right here, but it's not the lowest point, okay? The lowest and the highest get this term absolute. If it's not the absolute lowest or highest, we use relative because within the confines of this general area, this spot right there happens to be lower than most other points in the area. Okay? So, taking that all the way out, I can say those are my points. So I have a relative maximum at negative 2, 4, relative min at negative 5, negative 1.3, and an absolute min at 5, negative 6. So we're not talking about an interval, we're talking about a precise coordinate, okay? So in other words, this right here doesn't mean it's at its maximum between negative 2 and 4. That right there is a coordinate. So don't confuse the notation for a coordinate and the notation for an interval. You have to keep in mind the context of the problem that you're looking at. Now, I've been thinking, I have this awkward way of signing off of these videos, so I could really use some type of catchphrase or something that lets you know that this is the definitive end of a particular video. And I really don't have anything in mind, so I'll just say a few, and you let me know what your favorite is, and maybe that'll be my catchphrase, like this.
Adios, muchachos!